Thank you for watching this video. To best support the channel, please take a moment and click the subscribe button. Also, the links to purchase this fly and the materials to tie the fly are in the description. In the vise, we have a Daiichi 2461 hook. It's a 3x long Aberdeen hook, and we have some Semperfli Nano Silk in copper in the 12-aught or 50 denier that we're using. We're going to go ahead and start by adding some gold lead dumbbell eyes in size small. We're going to have those just a little bit behind the eye of the hook, and we'll get those caught in by doing some crossing wraps over the top of the hook and wrapping around it. And then what we'll do is we'll do some loops around the eyes to make sure that they're locked into place. And we'll do that all around the top of the hook, just cinching those thread wraps nice and tight. And we'll go through and lock these eyes in even better. Once we have the lead eyes locked into place, we're going to go ahead and just throw down a kind of an open spiral thread wrap up and down the hook, just to give us a little bit of grip for whenever we need it. With that done, we'll go ahead and grab some light orange starburst fibers and create a dubbing noodle. We're going to create a pretty large dubbing ball right here, and we're doing that to help keep our pinchers or our claws separated when we're tying them in. So see, we're just trying to stay right above that hook point. And then we'll build that in. Next, what we'll go ahead and do is grab some Crawdad orange rabbit zonker strips, and we're going to go ahead and tie those in on both sides of this dubbing ball. So you see I have a strip that goes from the back of the lead eyes to the front of the dubbing ball, and that'll be the length that extends from the tie-in point backwards. And we'll use a second piece that's that same length on the opposite side. Before we tie that in, we're going to go ahead and do some wraps around the rabbit zonker to help pull that out to the side and keep that splayed a little bit more than just letting it rest against that dubbing ball. Now that that's in place, we'll go ahead and grab our other zonker strip and tie that in. We'll measure them to make sure they're the same length. We need to move this one forward just a little bit. And keep that zonker hide on the towards us side of the hook so that it keeps it as balanced as we can. Now we're going to wrap our thread forward and around the eyes so we can start wrapping the other direction. Normally we're going top to bottom and forward to backward. Now we're going the exact opposite, backwards to forward on the hook and underneath, so we can do the same thing about spreading that zonker strip out and pull that towards the front with an under wrap. See me wrapping around the hook, and then I'll take the thread underneath that zonker and pull it forward. Then once we get to the eye, we'll just go ahead and wrap around the eyes a couple of times and make it so we can tie our thread back in the normal direction we usually do. You may have just seen for a second there that I rotated the vise to make sure that those pincers were pointed away from each other. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is add some silly legs. And these are the brown and black color. They're barred silly legs. We'll take a full leg and split it in half. And what we're going to do is we're going to use 1.5 legs or 3 sections of it. And we're going to divide this body into 3 tie-in points. So we'll cross over the top and then cross over the other direction diagonally to lock these legs into place. They're a little wiggly and a little screwy sometimes. Sometimes it's really fast to tie these in. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a challenge. So we got that first one tied in. Cut my rabbit zonker somehow. Got that first one tied in. And now we'll go ahead and just make sure everything's where we want it and balanced out. Then we'll move to that second tie-in point and repeat the process. Make sure those legs are pretty even length. Wiggle them around a little bit. Then once they're in place, go ahead and get ready to tie in the third ones. So you just that same crossing over pattern. Now we have our third section of legs that we're going to tie in. Cross over the top, rotate. Make sure the legs are basically the same length. And then lock this into place. Now we're going to work our thread towards the back of the hook once we have these tied in. And we're going to build the body of this fly now that we're working our way back. The body of our fly is going to be two different colors of fur from the rabbit zonker strip. We're going to snip the fur off and put it into a dubbing loop. And in this particular version, we're using olive and crawdad orange. And what we'll do is we'll take a section of each, and we will put it in our dubbing loop. And let's build that dubbing loop real quick while we're talking. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we have everything in place. We'll move our thread back forward, and we'll use our dubbing loop tweezers or a pair of tweezers or clamp, whatever you want to use. And just stack the olive and the orange on top of each other. And then we'll slide it into that dubbing loop and spin things up. To pause for a second because it's not a super fast process to get that done. Be careful not to drop the rabbit fur. It's kind of a pain if you don't keep it in place. So get that in, even up the edges a little bit. See me tapping those just a little bit, pulling things forward, and spreading stuff out a little bit. Now we'll go ahead and start spinning this up. Now that we're getting this spun up, we'll go ahead and brush things out a little bit. And then we'll spin it up just a little bit more to make sure that everything's locked in there nice and tight. And then we'll go ahead and start wrapping this forward. You have to be careful not to trap these rubber legs, these silly legs. So I'm using the spare portion or the excess portion of thread before the materials in the dubbing loop to get that material right where I want it. And now I'm going to preen these rabbit hair fibers towards the back of the fly so that I don't trap too much of it when I'm wrapping forward. And then just make sure you're pulling these rubber legs in the right direction and not pinning them and trapping them when you're spinning around the hook with this rabbit dubbing loop, or this rabbit loop. And every one of these flies is going to spin out just a little bit differently because of the way that the fur is spinning. You can try and get it to be as similar as you can, but it will have a slightly different pattern every time. So I'm to the point where I'm wrapping my last section that I can, and I'm going to go between the legs, move all the legs around where they need to be. And then I'm doing a couple of wraps of just the thread to get me in a spot where I can tie that off. And then I'll end up creating another dubbing loop here in just a moment, another loop of hair. So I'm pulling everything out of the way so I can get my thread ready again. Tie that around a couple of times, lock it into place. Now I'm going to cut off the excess of that original loop. Just checking to make sure I didn't trap any of the legs in the process. Now from here, we'll go ahead and create another loop. We'll get that to start right behind the eyes. And then put our thread back in front of the hook, or back in front of the eyes. Just throw a quick whip finish to make sure it doesn't fall out on me. And now we'll go ahead and grab some more orange and some more olive fur off of the zonker strips. And we'll get ready to place that in our loop and spin that up. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to do this. Okay, I've got that in there. Gonna tap the edges a little bit, clean things up. And this time I'm gonna grab my scissors and clean the edge up a little bit as well. Make it so I have a little bit cleaner, less bulky section right here. Then we'll start spinning this up and get it spun up nice and tight. In this section where I'm so close to the legs, I'll have to be careful that the legs don't get trapped in the spinning process. Just move them out of the way, see how long that lasts. Now grab our brush and brush that out a little bit. And then we'll work our way back to where we were before, using that excess section before the materials that are spun up are, and use that to work our way back to our previous edge, and work those rubber legs, those silly legs around the material so we're not trapping anything. You got to get those legs to stay on the right sides or it's going to trap it and have everything be off balance. Now I've got both those front legs in the right spot. Now I'll just do a couple finishing wraps and build that up right up against the edge of the eyes and build that final collar. Then just wrap a couple of times in front of the eyes so we have a clean tie-off point. And then grab our main thread and capture that loop that we have so it doesn't come undone. Now, if you're going to be fishing this fly immediately for carp, you may want to hold off on adding some resin. If you have a couple of days and it has plenty of time to cure, then go ahead and put a little dab of resin on there. I'm going to leave the resin off while tying this video because this video is long enough as it is already. So go ahead and do a whip finish. I like throwing in a second whip finish for those flies that don't have the resin on them. Give it a little bit of extra durability. And now you have a completed fly. Go ahead and throw this fly at carp, at bass, even at trout, and hold on tight. It's a wiggly, full of movement fly that'll get down quick and get the attention of some hungry fish. All the materials for this fly are in the shop. Please swing by and grab them, pick up some flies, and as always, please take a moment and like and subscribe to the channel.